Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. Spirit. We're still on the spirit section. It is the longest in the whole work. Culture, faith, and pure insight. The spirit of self-alienation has its existence in the world of culture, but since the whole has become alienated from itself, there stands beyond that world the unreal of pure consciousness or of thought. Its content is in the form of pure thought, and thought is its absolute element. Since, however, thought is in the first instance only the element of this world, consciousness has only these thoughts, but as yet it does not think them, or is unaware that they are thoughts. There exist for consciousness in the form of picture thoughts, for it steps out of its actual world into pure consciousness, yet is itself generally still in the sphere of the actual world and its determinateness. The disrupted consciousness is only in itself, or implicitly, the self-identity of pure consciousness. A fact that is known to us, but not to itself. Thus, it is only the immediate elevation of itself, an elevation it has not yet accomplished within itself, and it still has within it its opposite principle by which it is conditioned, without having become a master of it through the movement of mediation. Consequently, the essence of its thought has for it the value of essence, not merely in the form of the abstract in itself, but in the form of a common actuality, of an actuality that has merely been raised into another element, without having lost therein the specific character of an actuality that does not exist, merely in thought. It is essential to distinguish it from the in itself, which is the essence of the Stoic consciousness. What counted for the latter was merely the form of thought as such, which besides has any alien content taken from the actual world. What counts, however, for the consciousness we are dealing with, is not the form of thought. This too is essentially distinct from the in itself of the virtuous consciousness, for which essence, though it stands in a relationship to the actual world, and is the essence of the actual world itself, yet is initially a non-actual essence. In the consciousness under discussion, essence, although lying beyond the actual world, nonetheless counts as an actual essence. In the same way, what is intrinsically right and good in the sphere of legislative reason, and the universal that is adopted by consciousness in testing laws, these also do not possess the character of actuality. Therefore, while pure thought fell within the world of culture itself as an aspect of the alienation, namely as the standard for judging good and bad in the abstract, through having passed through the process of the whole, it has become enriched with the moment of actuality, and thereby with content. But this actuality of the essence is at the same time only an actuality of pure, not of actual consciousness. Although it is raised into the element of thought, it does not yet count as a thought, for this actual consciousness. Rather, it lies for the latter beyond its own actuality, for it is the flight from this actuality. Religion. For it is obviously religion that we are speaking about in the form in which it appears here, as the faith belonging to the world of culture does not yet appear as it is in and for itself. We have already seen it in other characteristic forms, namely as the unhappy consciousness, as a shape of the insubstantial process of consciousness itself. It made its appearance too in the ethical substance as faith in the underworld, though consciousness of the departed spirit is, strictly speaking, not faith, not essence posited in the element of pure consciousness beyond the actual world, but has itself an immediate presence, its element in the family. Here, however, religion in part has proceeded from the substance, and is the pure consciousness of it. In part, this pure consciousness is alienated from its actual consciousness, the essence from its existence. True, it is thus no longer the insubstantial process of consciousness, but it still has the characteristic of an antithesis to actuality, as this actuality in general, and of an antithesis to self-consciousness in particular. It is therefore essentially merely a belief. This pure consciousness of absolute being is an alienated consciousness. We have now to look more closely at the specific nature of that of which it is the other, and we must consider it only in connection with this other. To begin with, this pure consciousness seems to have over against it only the world of actuality, but since it is the flight from this world, and therefore has the character of an antithesis to it, it bears the world within itself. Pure consciousness is therefore in its own self alienated from itself, and faith constitutes only one aspect of it. At the same time, the other aspect has already come to view. Pure consciousness, namely its reflection out of the world of culture, in such a way that the substance of that world, and also the masses or groups into which it is articulated, are shown to be what they are in themselves, spiritual essentialities. Absolutely restless processes of determination which are directly cancelled in their opposite. Their essence, simple consciousness, is thus the simplicity of absolute difference, which is at once no difference. Consequently, it is pure being for self, not as this single self, but as the immanently universal self in the form of a restless process which attracts and pervades the passive essence of the matter in hand. In it is thus to be found the certainty that at once knows itself to be the truth. Pure thought as the absolute nothing, as the absolute notion in the might of its negativity, which eliminates everything objective that supposedly stands over against consciousness, and makes it into a being which has its origin in consciousness. This pure consciousness is at the same time equally simple, just because its difference is no difference. But as this form of simple reflection into self, it is the element of faith in which spirit has the determinateness of positive universality of being in itself, in contrast to that being for self of self-consciousness, forced back into itself out of the essenceless, merely dissolving world. Spirit, in accordance with its truth, is in an undivided unity, at once the absolute movement and negativity of its process of manifestation, as well as its inwardly satisfied essence and its positive repose. But coming generally under the determinateness of alienation, these two moments fall apart into a dual consciousness. The former is pure insight as the spiritual process, which focuses itself in self-consciousness, a process which is confronted by consciousness of what is positive, the form of objectivity or of picture thinking, and which turns against it. But pure insight's own object is only the pure I. The simple consciousness of the positive, or the tranquil self-identity, on the other hand, has for its object the in essence qua essence. Pure insight has therefore, in the first instance, no content of its own, because it is negative being for self. To faith, on the other hand, there belongs a content, but without insight. Johann Zoffany. You like doing self-portraits in various guises, as we shall see. In the former, if the former does not step outside self-consciousness, the latter certainly has its content in the element of pure self-consciousness, but in thought, not in notion, in pure consciousness, not in pure self-consciousness. Hence faith is certainly pure consciousness of essence, that is, of the simple inner being, and thus is thought. the cardinal factor in the matter of faith, which is usually overlooked. The immediacy of the presence of essence in it is due to the fact that its object is essence, that is, pure thought. This immediacy, however, so far as thought it enters into consciousness, or pure consciousness, enters into self-consciousness, acquires the significance of an objective being which lies beyond the consciousness of the self. It is through the significance which the immediacy and the simplicity of pure thought obtains in consciousness that the essence of faith is no longer a pure thought, but is reduced to the level of something imagined, and becomes a supersensible world which is essentially an other in relation to self-consciousness. In pure insight, on the other hand, the transition of pure thought into consciousness has the opposite determination. Objectivity has the significance of a merely negative content, a content which is reduced to a moment and returns into the self. That is to say, only the self is really the object of the self, or the object only has truth so far as it has the form of the self. Just as faith and pure insight belong in common to the element of pure consciousness, so also are they in common the return from the actual world of culture. Consequently, they present themselves according to three aspects. First, each is an intrinsic being on its own account, apart from all relationships. Second, each stands in relationship with the actual world in an antithesis to pure consciousness. And third, each is related within pure consciousness to the other. In the consciousness of the believer, the aspect of being in and for itself is its absolute object, whose content and determination we already know. For according to the notion of faith, it is nothing else but the actual world raised into the universality of pure consciousness. The articulation of this world, therefore, constitutes the organization of the world of faith, except that in the latter, the parts do not alienate themselves in their spiritualization, but are beings, each with an existence of its own spirit, spirits which have returned into themselves and abide with themselves. The movement of their transition into one another is therefore only for us an alienation of the specific character in which they exist in their own distinctiveness, and is only for us a necessary series. For faith, however, their difference is a tranquil diversity, and their movement a real happening. To name them briefly according to the external determination of the form, just as in the world of culture, state power, or the good, was primary, so here too the first is the absolute being, spirit that is in and for itself, insofar as it is the simple eternal substance, but in the actualization of its notion, in being spirit, it passes over into being for another. Its self-identity becomes an actual self-sacrificing absolute being. It becomes a self, but a mortal, perishable self. Consequently, the third moment is the return of this alienated self and of the humiliated substance into their original simplicity. Only in this way is substance represented as spirit. These distinct beings, when brought back to themselves by thought out of the flux of the actual world, are immediate eternal spirits, whose being lies in thinking the unity which they constitute. Removed thus from self-consciousness, these beings are nevertheless actively present in it, for if the absolute being were to remain unmoved in the form of the first simple substance, it would remain alien to self-consciousness, but the externalization of this substance, and then in spirit, involves the moment of actuality and thereby makes itself a participant in the self-consciousness of the believer, or the believing consciousness belongs to the actual world. According to this second relationship, the believing consciousness partly has its actuality in the real world of culture and constitutes the spirit and the existence of that world, which we have already considered partly. However, the believing consciousness confronts its own actuality as something worthless and is the process of overcoming it. This process does not consist in the believing consciousness making brilliant remarks about the perversion of the real world, of its real world, for it is the simple, naive consciousness which reckons such brilliance as vanity, since it still has the real world for its purpose. On the contrary, contrasted with the tranquil realm of its thought, the real world is a soulless existence, which therefore has to be overcome in an external manner. The obedience of service and praise by setting aside sense knowledge and action produces the consciousness of unity with the absolute being, though not as a unity that is actually perceived. On the contrary, this service is only the perpetual process of producing that unity, a process which does not completely attain its goal in the present. The religious community, it is true, does so, for it is universal self-consciousness, but for the individual self-consciousness, the realm of pure thought necessarily remains a beyond of its actual world, or since this beyond, through the externalization of the eternal being, has entered the actual world, the actuality is an uncomprehended sensuous actuality. But one sensuous actuality remains indifferent to the other, and the beyond has only received the further character of remoteness in space and time. The notion, however, the actuality of spirit present to itself, remains in the consciousness of the believer, the inner being, which is everything and which acts, but does not itself come forth. Johann Zoffany, depicting himself as David, with the head of Goliath. Well, I don't think he was lacking in self-esteem. In pure insight, however, the notion is alone, the actual, and this third aspect of faith, that of being an object of pure insight, is really the true relation in which faith here appears. Pure insight itself, like faith, is to be considered partly in and for itself, and partly in its relationship to the actual world, so far as this is still present in a positive form, namely as a vain consciousness, and lastly in that relation to faith mentioned above. We have seen what pure insight is in and for itself. As faith is the tranquil, pure consciousness of spirit as essence, so is pure insight the self-consciousness of spirit as essence. It therefore knows essence not as essence, but as absolute self. It therefore seeks to abolish every kind of independence other than that of self-consciousness, whether it be the independence of what is actual or of what possesses intrinsic being, and to give it the form of notion. Pure insight is not only the certainty of self-conscious reason, that it is all truth, it knows that it is. However, in the form in which the notion of pure insight first makes its appearance, it is not yet realized. Accordingly, its consciousness still appears as contingent, as single and separate, and its essence appears for it in the form of an end which it has to realize. It has to begin with the intention of making pure insight universal, that is, of making everything that is actual into a notion, and into one and the same notion in every self-consciousness. The intention is pure, for it has this pure insight for its content, and this insight is likewise pure, for its content is solely the absolute notion, which meets with no opposition in an object, nor is it restricted in its own self. In the unrestricted notion there are directly found the two aspects, that everything objective has only the significance of being for self, of self-consciousness, and that this has the significance of a universal, that pure insight is to become the property of every self-consciousness. This second aspect of the intention is a result of culture, insofar as in this culture the difference of objective spirit, the parts and the determinations which its judgment imposed on the world, as well as the differences which appear as natural predispositions, have all been upset. Genius, talent, special capacities generally belong to the world of actuality insofar as the world which contains the aspect of being a spiritual animal kingdom in which individuals, amid confusion and mutual violence, cheat and struggle over the essence of the actual world. These differences, it is true, have no place in this world as honest espèce. Individuality neither is contented with the unreal matter in hand itself, nor has it a particular content and ends of its own. On the contrary, it counts merely as something universally acknowledged, viz., as an educated individuality, and the difference is reduced to one of less or more energy, a quantitative difference, that is, a non-essential difference. And this last difference, however, has been effaced by the fact that in the completely disrupted state of consciousness, a difference changed round into an absolutely qualitative difference. There, what is for the I and other is only the I itself. In this infinite judgment, all one-sidedness and peculiarity of the original being for self has been eradicated. The self knows itself, qua pure self, to be its own object, and this absolute identity of the two sides is the element of pure insight. Pure insight is therefore the simple, immanently differentiated essence, and equally the universal work or achievement and a universal possession. In this simple spiritual substance, self-consciousness gives itself and preserves for itself in every object the consciousness of this, its own particular being, or of its own action. Just as conversely, the individuality of self-consciousness is therein self-identical and universal. This pure insight is thus the spirit that calls to every consciousness, be for yourselves what you all are in yourselves, reasonable. Johann Zoffany, donning the habit of a monk. Well, coming up next is the Enlightenment. Perhaps he is protecting himself from what is coming.